Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Good. Welcome back. We continue. This is the last section of the Aranyaka Parva. Is this Yaksha Prashna, this dialogue with the Yaksha in the form of Prashna and Uttara, questions and answers. We're going to see those questions shortly. But the chapter begins, or the section begins with this really delightful story. I'll just summarize what we've seen so far. We'll finish the story portion today. So the Pandavas are living in that forest for 12 years. No running water except in the form of rivers. They're staying in a place where there's no water available. Yudhishthira asks Nakula, please go fetch some water. He finds this beautiful pond surrounded by birds. He goes to take some water and he hears a voice. The voice says, don't do it. Don't take any water unless you answer my questions. The voice of the Yaksha. Yaksha would be like a nature spirit, a water spirit. Nakula ignores the voice, drinks some water and falls dead. And dead means dead, not metaphorically dead. He is dead. Then Nakula doesn't come back, so Yudhishthira sends Sahadev. Go get your brother, and while you're doing that, bring back some water. They're all thirsty. So Sahadev goes, sees his brother lying dead, hears a voice, but he's also very thirsty. So they're all very thirsty. So he ignores the voice, he drinks some water, Sahadev falls dead. Then Yudhishthira sends Arjuna. Arjuna hears a voice. Don't drink the water. Arjuna pulls out his bow and arrows, starts trying to kill whatever it is. Can't see the Yaksha. It doesn't have physical form. Arrows just fall back useless. And finally, Arjuna defies the voice, drinks some of the water. Arjuna falls dead. Meanwhile, Yudhishthira now has one left. Bhishma is left. Bhima, sorry. That's a pretty silly mistake. Okay, Bhima is left. So he says, Bhima, go and see what happened to your brothers and bring back some water. That's where we left off on the story. The story portion will continue to go quickly through the story until we come to the questions, and then we'll see the very interesting questions that follow. All right. So this is where we left off. Tan drashtva dukito bhimas, tan drashtva dukito trishaya cha prapiritaha, trishaya cha amanyata mahabahuhu, amanyata karma tad yaksha rakshasam, karma tad yaksha. Bhimaha, at the end of the first line, Bhima, who was dukitaha, extremely sad. Why? Tan drishtva, having seen them. Having seen whom? Arjuna, Sahadeva, and Nakula. Imagine seeing three of your brothers lying dead. This is Bhima's response. So seeing his three brothers lying there dead at the pond. But Bhima, like all of them, was prapiditaha, extremely afflicted, trishaya, with thirst. And you can imagine what's going to happen, which we'll see in the next verse. But here, amanyata mahabahuhu, Mahabahu, that mighty armed Bhima, what did he do? Amanyata karma, tat karma, amanyata tat karma, those deeds of the Yaksha Rakshasam. Raksha means Rakshasa. So that Yaksha, who was a Rakshasa, the karma, the deeds of that Raksha. What were the deeds of the Yaksha? To kill Sahadeva, Nakula, and Arjuna. And what did Bhima do? Amanyata. The translation here is horribly wrong. He considered, not ignored, he considered. The of the verb, amanyata, is for past tense. You don't negate a verb with So amanyata, he considered the terrible deeds of that Rakshasa. He thought it over. He thought, what happened? Who killed my brothers? And then Sachintayama satada Sachintayama Yodhavyam Dhruvamadhyame Yodhavyam Yudhyama Tatobhyadhavat Paniyam Tatobhyadhavat Pipasu Purushar Shabha Pipasu Purushar Saha, he, Bhima, Chintayamasa, he thought the situation over, seeing his brothers laying there dead, and tada at that time. So he thought it over. And what did he think? The next line is a kind of like a quotation. Yodhavyam dhruvam adya me. Adya, today. Me, for me. Yudhyavyam dhruvam. A battle is certain. Fighting is certain. So seeing his brothers having been killed, Bhima just is convinced that now I will fight against whoever has killed my brothers. So Bhima is ready for fighting right then and there. He was ready to fight. Tataha, but then, remember, prior verse said he was pipasuhu. He was very thirsty. And I guess before you enter into battle, it would be good to drink some water. So, tataha, then, abhyadhavat, he excuse me, abhyadhavat, he approached paniyam, the pond. There's a pond surrounded by birds. He approached that water, papasuhu, oh, there's the word, being thirsty. Prior verse was trishaya piditaha, afflicted, extremely afflicted by thirst. Here, it reminds us, pipasuhu, he was very thirsty. Who was very thirsty? Purusha Rishabha, that mighty person, Bhima, being extremely thirsty. He approached the pond to drink some water before fighting with whoever had killed his brothers. Then what happened? Yakshavacha Yakshav Matata Sahasam Karshir Matata Sahasam Mama Purva Parigraha Mama Purva Prashnan Uktva Tu Kaunteya Prashnan Tata Pibahara Swacha Tata Pibahara. So what does the Yaksha say? Tata, dear one, Ma Sahasam Karshihi, don't be foolish. Don't be impulsive. Sahasam. Don't be impulsive. Don't be foolish. And why? Because the water is mama purva parigraha. The Yaksha says that the water has been purva, previously it has been parigraha, protected, reserved mama, by me, or for me. So this water has been cursed with some mantras so that no one else can drink the water without the Yaksha's permission. So the water has been protected by me, restricted for my use and my use only. Prashnanuktva tu Kaunteya, O Kaunteya, O son of Kunti. The Yaksha addresses Bhima, having never met him before, but seems to know his name. Seems to know Bhima is a son of Kunti. How does he know? We'll find out later. But right now, highly unusual that this Yaksha, this water spirit, should know who Bhima is. And he says, too, but Prashnan uktva, if you can answer my questions, Prashna. Yaksha Prashna, there's the title of our chapter. So, uktva, having answered my Prashnan, my questions, tataha, then, piba, then you can go ahead and drink, harasvacha, and you can take some water back with you, only after answering my questions. Vaishampayano vacha, Vaishampayana, evam huktastato bhimo, evam huktastato, yakshenamita tejasa, yakshenamita, avijñāyaiva tan prashnan, avijñānaiva, Pitvaiva nipapataha, pitvaiva nipapat. Evam uktaha tataha bhimaha, tataha then, Bhima, who was evam uktaha, who was addressed thus, who was spoken to thus by the Yaksha. Look at the third line, avijñāya, ignoring. Having ignored Tan prashnan, those questions. The Yaksha just said, you can only drink the water if you answer my questions. What does Bhima do? Avijñāya, having ignored tan prashnan, those questions that were demanded by the Yaksha. The Yaksha, the questions given by the Yaksha, yakshena, the questions asked by the Yaksha, who is amita Tejasa, the Yaksha whose tejas, whose literally brilliance, but it means power. The Yaksha whose power is amita, unlimited, boundless. So if you ignore the questions of a 2-year-old, the consequences won't be very much. But when you ignore the questions of this amita tejas Yaksha, this Yaksha whose power is limitless, to ignore his questions, you do so at your own peril, which is exactly what Bhima does. He ignores the questions and pitva eva, and having drunk the water, what happens? Nipapata. He fell dead. 4 of 5 Pandavas are lying there at the pond dead. Then what happens? Tata kunti suto raja, tata kunti suto, vichintya purushar shabaha, vichintya puru, apeta jana nirghosham, apeta jana, pravivesha mahavanam, pravivesha mahavanam. Tataha, then, Raja, the king, who was at Kunti Sutaha, the son of Kunti, who is Yudhishthira, who is Purusharshabha, this mighty warrior. What did he do? Vichintya, he thought. Why is he thinking? None of his 4 brothers has returned from the pond. Now, he doesn't know why. He has no idea that there's a Yaksha. He has no idea that his 4 brothers have been stricken dead. All he knows is that he sent each of them to get water, and none of them have returned. Vichintya, thinking about this, what did he do? Last line, pravivesha, he entered. What? Mahavanam, that great forest. What kind of forest? Apeta jana and nirghosham. The forest was apeta jana. No one lives there. It is a lonely, barren forest, apeta jana, and it is nirghosham, silent. Here the poetry is trying to get a mood. Usually, forests are filled with animals jumping around and the sounds of birds chirping and all of this. But the feeling of this forest is very different. Not a creature is moving, and not a sound can be heard. So it is a very, very good for what we just had this trick-or-treat thing, this Halloween. So this is that very spooky forest, a Halloween type of forest. So Yudhishthira enters that very spooky, eerily silent and empty, barren, forsaken forest. How's that? Viprakirna dhanur banam, viprakirna dhanur, drishtva nihatam arjunam, drishtva Bhimasenam yamaucho bhao, Bhimasenam nirvicheshtan gatayushaha, nirvicheshtan gatayushaha. In a second line, drishtva. Yudhishthira, drishtva, having seen. Having seen what? What a scene. What he confronted was just something. It's already a spooky forest, and having walking through this spooky forest, he comes across this scene of horror. What does he see? He sees Vikirna Dhanur Banam. He sees the Dhanush, the bow, and Banam, the arrows of Arjuna. He sees the bow and arrows of Arjuna Vikirna scattered all over the place. Remember, Arjuna was shooting the arrows up in the sky, and they just all came down. So he sees this pond with the arrows scattered about the pond, and Arjuna's bow laying there on the ground. Not only Arjuna's bow is on the ground, but Nihatam Arjunam. He sees Arjuna also, who is Nihatam, lying dead. He sees Arjuna lying dead, Bhima Senam, and he sees Bhima also laying there dead. Also, Yamaucha Ubhau. Yama means pair. Yamau Ubhau, the twins. Yama, twins. So he sees the twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, lying there dead, lying there nirvicheshtan, not moving. Gata ayushaha, without life, lifeless and unmoving. He sees his four dear brothers. What could be more horrible than that? And the poetry really what sets you up. We're skipping a lot of verses, I have to tell you. But if we saw we'd probably see 10 verses describing the horror of the scene and really developing the frightening, terrible nature of what Yudhishthira confronts. Then, Sadhirgamushnam nishvasya, Sadhirgamushnam Shoka bashpa pariplutaha, Shoka bashpa Buddhya vichintayamasa, Buddhya vichintaya, Virah kena nipatitaha, Virah kena pripatitaha. Saha, he, Yudhishthira, Dirgham ushnam nishvasya. Ushnam nishvasya, taking a breath. Dirgham, a deep breath. Sighing deeply, with a deep sigh. Yudhishthira, who is shoka bashpa pariplutaha. Yudhishthira is paripluta, is overcome by bashpa, tears of shoka, sorrow. Just weeping tears of sorrow. Buddhya vichintayamasa, and thinking with his mind. He's thinking. What is he thinking? Kena. Who did it? Kena, by whom? Viraha nipatitaha. These viraha, these heroes. His brothers were not weak critters. His brothers were mighty warriors. So viraha, these mighty warriors, are nipatita, are killed. Kena, by whom? Who committed this act of horror? Etenadhyavasayena Etenadhyavasayena Tattoyamavagadhavan Tattoyamavagahamanascha Tattoyam Gahamanascha Tat Antarikshat Sushruve Antarikshat Etena Adhyavasayena, with this in his mind. Etena avasaya means his thought. So with this thought in mind, what is the thought? Who killed my brothers? So thinking about his brothers, remember they were in that forest kind of faint with thirst. So, and Yudhishthira is still faint with thirst. So he's in front of the pond and he's desperate to find out who has killed his brothers, but he's also desperate for water. Both. So what does he do? Tattoyam, into that water of a Gadhavan. He jumps. He jumps into the pond of a Gadhavan. He is one who has jumped into that water. And Gahamanahacha Tattoyam, and having jumped into that pond, Antarikshat, from the sky, Saha, he, Yudhishthira, Shushruve, he heard that voice from the sky. Now, remember, he's already in the pond. And now he's in the pond, about to drink the water. And now only he hears that voice from the sky. Whose voice? Of course, the Yaksha. Yakshuvacha, Yaksha. Now the meter changes here. Ahambaka shaivala matsya bhaksho. Ahambaka shaivala matsya bhak. Maya nita pretavasham tavanujaha. Maya nita pretavasham tavanuja. Tvam panchamo bhavita rajaputra. Tvam panchamo bhavita rajaputra. Nachet prashnan prachato vyakaroshi. Nachet prashnan prachato vyakaroshi. So that voice announces itself. And for the first time, it says who he is. He says, that voice says, Aham Bakaha. Baka is one of the birds. This pond is surrounded by birds. Baka is a particular kind of aquatic bird. I think we call it in English a crane. You know, they got the really long legs and really big wings, and I think the long neck and all of this stuff. So the Yaksha says, Aham Bakaha. So Yaksha telling the truth? So it's not a baka. It's not a crane at all. He's trying to trick Yudhishthira. So he says, I am, there are so many of these birds around the pond. So the Yaksha says, Aham Bakaha. I am a crane. What kind of bird? Shaivala Matsya Bhakshaha. I am a bird, Bhakshaha, who eats Matsya, fish, and Shaivala, the moss and plants that grow on top of the pond surface is called Shaivala, moss. So he says, I am a baka, I am a bird who eats fish and moss, and maya, by me, tava anujaha, your brothers. How does he know they're his brothers? So this Yaksha knows quite a bit. Definitely not a baka, not a bird. So tava anujaha, your brothers, are pretavasham nitaha. Literally led to death means killed. Literally led to death means killed. So your brothers were killed by me. All right. Tvam, you, Yudhishthira, Rajaputra, O son of a king, you of royalty tvam, you, panchamaha bhavita. You are about to become the fifth. The fifth of what? 4 brothers are lying dead. And Yudhishthira is warned, you are about to become the panchamaha, the fifth, who is lying dead. Nachet, unless prashnan prachataha, the questions that are asked of you, prashnan prachataha, the questions that are asked, navyakaroshi, if you don't answer. Navyakaroshi, if you do not answer these questions, you will certainly become the fifth a brother to lie there dead at the pond. Yudhishthira Yudhishthira. We're back to the normal meaning, normal meter. Rudranam va vasunam va, Rudranam va vasu, Marutam va pradhana bhak, Maruta va Prachami ko bhavan devo, Prachami ko bhavan, Naitat chakunina kritam, Naitat chakunina. In the third line, Prachami, I ask, ko bhavan, who are you? Devaha, ko devaha, which God are you? The Yaksha just announced itself as a bird, and Yudhishthira knows this is no bird that I'm talking to you. He says, in the last line, na etat, this, na kritam, could not have been done, shakunina, by a bird. Shakuni actually means bird. Shakunina, by a bird. No bird is going to kill his 4 brothers. His 4 brothers are mighty warriors. No bird could possibly, in fact, no person, hardly, no human being, in Yudhishthira's mind, no human being could have killed his 4 brothers. So he says, Ko devaha bhavan, which God are you? And in the end of the second line, he says, are you pradhana bhak? Are you the foremost Rudranam? Amongst the gods known as Rudras, there's a group of 11 Rudras. Are you the greatest of the 11 Rudras? Va, or Vasunam, Va. There's a group of 8 Vasus, also great gods. Are you the Pradhana Bhak? Are you the foremost among the 8 Vasus? Va, or Marutam, Va, Pradhana Bhak. Marut is another category of gods. There are 49 of them. And he asks, are you the foremost, Pradhana Bhak? Are you the foremost among these gods? So he's trying to find out. He knows this Yaksha is no bird. He knows this Yaksha is more powerful than any human being. So he asks, which deity are you? What god are you? Yaksho vacha, Yaksho, Yaksho hamasmi bhadram te, Yaksho hamasmi bhadram. Nasmi pakshi jale charaha, Nasmi pakshi mayete nihita sarve, mayete nihita bhrataraste mahaujasaha, bhrataraste. So now first he said aham bakaha, and he knows that he wasn't able to fool Yudhishthira at all. So now he says, aham asmi, I am yakshaha, a yaksha. Now, at least he's not lying by saying he's a bird, but is he a yaksha? How does he know who each of these Pandavas are? So he still is not telling the complete truth. So he's still making a pretense. So he's not. He says, aham yakshaha, I am a yaksha, a nature spirit, a water spirit. Bhadram te, blessings unto you, Yudhishthira. Na asmi pakshi. I am not a bird. You should have figured that out already. Pakshi, a bird, who is jale charaha, a bird that lives in water. Na asmi. I am not an aquatic bird. I am a yaksha, which is not completely true, as we'll see later. Maya, by me. Ete sarve brataraha, all of your brothers. Te brataraha, the brothers of you. Ete sarve, all of them, all of your brothers who are maha ojasaha, who have tremendous ojas. Ojas means energy, power, strength. Your incredibly powerful, strong brothers, all of them, maya nihitaha, they were all killed by me, the yaksha. Himete bhrataro rajan, himete bhrataro varyamana maya sakrata, varyamana maya balatoyam jihirshantaha, balatoyam jihirshantas, tato vai surita maya, tato vai surita. Imete bhrataraha, Rajan, O king. Imete bhrataraha, these brothers of yours were varyamanaha maya, they were warned. Varyamana, they were warned maya, by me. They were warned by me, asakrit, repeatedly warned by me. Don't drink the water. I've already protected the water. It's reserved for me. Don't drink the water unless you ask the questions. But balat, due to their insistence, toyam jehir shantaha, they were fixated on taking the water. Jihir shantaha, they wanted to take the toyam, the water, balat, by force. Ignoring my demand that they should answer my questions, they forcibly took the water. Tataha, therefore, vai, indeed, suritaha maya. Therefore, they were killed by me. They ignored my repeated warnings, and they tried to take the water by force. Therefore, I killed them. Napeyam udakam rajan, napeyam udakam pranan hiha paripsita, pranan hiha paripsata, prashnan huktva tu kaunteya, prashnan huktva tu tata Pibahara tata piba. Rajan, O king, udakam napeyam. This water is not to be drunk. Udakam, this water, napeyam, should not be drunk. Should not be drunk by whom? Paripsata, by one who desires pranan. It's a metaphor. One who desires prana, one who wants to live. By one who wants to live, these waters should not be drunk. Prashnan uktva tu, Kaunteya. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, tu, but prashnan uktva, if you answer my questions, tataha, then piba. Go ahead and drink. Harasvacha, and you can take some water. Yudhishthiro vacha, Yudhishthiro naivaham kama ye yaksha, naivaham kama tava purva parigraham, tava purva yatha prajnam tu te prashnan tat prativakshyami prachamam, prativakshyami. Yaksha, O Yaksha, he addresses, aham nakamaye, I do not want, tava purva parigraham jalam, we have to supply. I do not want the water which has been preserved for you, which has been set aside for you, which has been cursed by you. I don't want that water. In the last line he says, Prativakshyami, I will answer te prashnan, your questions. I will answer your questions, yata prajnam, to the best of my knowledge, to the best of my ability, te prashnan, your questions. Prativakshyami, I will answer. Pricha mam, go ahead and ask me. Ask me whatever you want. Yakshuvacha, kena swachrotriyo bhavati, kena swachrotriyo bhavati, kena switvindate mahata, kena switvindate, kena dvatiyavan bhavati, kena dvatiyavan, rajan kena cha buddhiman, rajan kena. So this is the first question, or I should say the first question that I'm including. I've taken just some of them. There's a long sequence of questions. In fact, the sequence of questions goes on for, in this version, in this critical edition, it goes on for about 34 verses. In the Bombay edition, it goes on for many more verses. So the editors removed a bunch. And each verse has 4 questions. So in the critical edition, there's a total of 68 questions. For my own interest, I wanted to figure out how many questions. Can you imagine if you want some water and somebody says, okay, all you have to do, you answer these 68 questions. By the way, and give correct answers. You can't just give any answer, but you have to, it's like a test. You have to have all 68 of these questions. You have to answer correctly. Then and only then can you drink the water. Of course, Yudhishthira is also thinking about his dead brothers, so we'll see that. So what we're going to see is an abbreviated treatment of this. I think if we went through all the questions, we'd be here for another month or two. So we'll see some of the questions and some of the answers. So this is the first of the questions we've included. So the Yaksha, and it's intended to be a test. I mean, it's not like the Yaksha already knows all of this stuff, right? The Yaksha already knows who the Pandavas are. So the Yaksha is not asking questions that he really wants to know the answers to. The Yaksha knows the answers to these questions. The Yaksha is administering a test to Yudhishthira. Why? You have to wait till the end of the chapter to find out. There's a reason. There's a very important reason that the Yaksha is administering this test. So the test is composed of 68 questions. Question number 1, Kena Swit, by what bhavati does a person become Shrotriyaha, learned? Shrotriya means a learned person. It literally means one who has heard and learned the scriptures. Shrotriya. Some of you know Shrotriyam Brahmanishtam, that famous statement from Mundaka Upanishad. So a Shrotriya is someone who has learned the Vedas and other scriptures due to listening. So Kena Swat, how? How does a person become Shrotriya? How does a person become learned in the Vedas? Kena Swat, and how? Vindate, does a person attain what? Mahat, that which is great. How does a person attain that which is great? How does a person attain greatness? Kena, by what? Dvatiyavan bhavati. By what does a person become dvatiyavan? One who has a second is dvatiyavan. And it's a very nebulous question. What does he mean? How do you gain a second? If I ask you that question, And that you're not going to get any water until you answer my question. And you say, but what does that question mean? Yudhishthira doesn't have any opportunity to ask what this question means. Yudhishthira has to figure out, what does that mean? Kena, by what, dvitiyavan bhavati, does a person gain a second? A second what? Good, and we'll see, actually we'll look at some of the options when we see the answers. And so that's the third question. Now the fourth question. Rajan, O king, kena, by what? Buddhiman. By what does a person become wise? Buddhiman, wise. Due to what does a person become wise? Here are the first 4 questions. And some of them are pretty peculiar questions, or even more peculiar questions yet to come. Yudhishthira has to deal with this, otherwise he won't. Yudhishthira is faint with thirst. He is desperate for water. If you've ever been really, really thirsty, that's interesting to reflect on. I just thought of this. When you're really, really thirsty and uncomfortable, you can't think straight. If you're that thirsty, if you're that uncomfortable, you can't even think straight. Under these conditions, Yudhishthira is being administered this test, this examination. So let's see his response to the first 4 of these questions. Yudhishthira vacha, Yudhishthira vacha, Shutena shrotriyo bhavati, Shutena shrotriyo, tapasa vindate mahata, tapasa vindate, dhritya dvatiya van bhavati, dhritya dvatiya van, buddhiman vriddha sevaya, buddhiman vriddha. So now Yudhishthira has to answer these questions, deal with all the ambiguity of the questions, which means he has to kind of imagine what does this Yaksha, what is he looking for? What is he asking? And he has to answer these questions correctly. And remember, he has to answer all of the questions. You don't remember when you were in school, you could have maybe you get 60 or 70% correct. You still passed. Well, Yudhishthira has to have 100% correct in order to pass this test. So the first question is, what makes a person a shrotriya, a learned person, a scholar? And he says, Shutena shrotriya bhavati. Shrotriya bhavati, one becomes a scholar, Shutena, by listening. And this is a perfect answer because it's a reference to the traditional way of learning, which was not through books, and certainly not through, nowadays everything comes in an electronic form. So not through your computer, not through books, but shutena, only by listening, by sitting at the feet of a guru, and by listening, and only by sitting at the feet of a guru and listening, only in that way, shrotriyaha bhavati, only in that way does one become a scholar. Second question, he says, by what vindate mahata, by what does a person gain mahat, greatness? And his answer is tapasa vindate mahat, by tapas. Now, the word tapas has several meanings. A common meaning is austerities, but the implied meaning is effort. By effort, one obtains greatness. And tapas implies not ordinary effort, but tapas implies an effort in which you probably suffer, undergo some great difficulty in making that effort. So effort to the point of suffering will, through that tremendous effort, vindate mahat, a person can gain greatness, that which is great. And then that was that very ambiguous question, the third question, Kena dvitiyavan bhavati. How do you gain a second? A second what? And it's extremely unclear. A second, you might guess a second person, like a friend, like a spouse, like a guru. So, Kena, how, dvitiyavan bhavati, how does one gain a second important person, like a friend, and here we have to interpret, because it's a very nebulous question, very indirect, vague. So, how does one attain a second, like a spouse or a friend or a guru? And his answer is dhritya, with dhriti, patience. With patience, one gains. And patience is important. To gain a friend, if you're impatient, you're going to drive everyone crazy. And so no friend will stick to you. If you're impatient, no one will want to become your spouse. And if you're impatient, when will you find the right guru? So, dhritya, with patience, dvitiyavan bhavati, one finds that second important person in one's life. Notice that's an interpretation of a very vague question. And a final question, Rajan, kena cha buddhiman, by what does one become buddhiman, wise? Buddhiman, you become wise, vriddha sevaya, through seva, service, to the vriddha, to the elderly. Now, by service to the elderly, but here, service to the elderly doesn't mean feeding them and taking care of their clothes and all of this stuff. Vriddha here means the wise ones. It's so significant that in all traditional cultures, this kind of changed in modern culture, but in all traditional cultures, vriddha, the elderly, were always assumed to be the most wise. This has always been the perspective until modern times. Notice how that perspective is. Today, many people look down upon the elderly. What do they know? Right? Isn't that a very common American expression? Yeah, there's old, what is the American expression? Old fogey. How's that? There's old fogey. What do they know? They're not part of our modern culture. They don't know anything. So in ancient times, and even not so ancient times, to be aged was a sign of experience, a sign of wisdom. Of course, things have changed. Just to be a little pragmatic about this, in the ancient times, the average life expectancy was what? 30s or 40s? If we lived 2,000 years ago, most of us would be dead. because that was the life expectancy back then. Which means, in those days, to be 40 years old was to be vriddha. How is that? So today, we do know that some exceedingly old people start losing their faculties. That's a fact. And especially, it's very sad, this Alzheimer's and dementia, terrible, terrible diseases, and diseases that afflict the elderly. There was no dementia in these days. No one lived to be 80 in these days. There are stories of people, of course, who lived to be hundreds, etc. They're stories. In real life, no one lived into their 80s and 90s in this very ancient time. Just their living conditions didn't support it. So vriddha then means someone who has lived at least 40 years, enough to gain some wisdom. So vriddha seva, through service of the wise, through taking care of the wise ones, through helping them, through sitting with them and learning from them. Buddhiman, one becomes wise. Now, just before we go on, it'd be nice to share something I think is a little interesting with you, and that is, I was a little curious to see what the traditional commentator says about these questions. The traditional commentator, there's basically one commentary on the entire Mahabharata. Not surprising. How big is Mahabharata? 84,000 verses. How many people do you think are willing to write a commentary on a text that's 84,000 verses? So there is one and only one commentary. It's by a great scholar called Nilakanta. Nilakanta is the name. I think he lived in North India maybe some 500 years ago. I'm guessing the age, something like that. And so he has a commentary on the whole thing. Turns out Nilakanta was a great Advaitin, a student of Advaita Vedanta as taught by Shankara and Shankara's tradition. And so when Nilakanta interprets the verses of the Bhagavad Gita, he looks at the verses of the Mahabharata. He looks at these verses through the lens of Advaita Vedanta. And that causes him to tilt his interpretation towards Advaita Vedanta. He writes a whole paragraph on this verse, and I didn't bring the book, I don't want to quote to you this whole paragraph, it'd be boring. But let me share with you his really unique interpretation of these questions, looking at it through the lens of Vedanta. He says, Shrutena shrotriya bhavati, you become a shrotriya by Shrutena, by listening, by Shravana. One of the main practices in Vedanta, along with Manana and Nididhyasana. So he thinks that here, Shrotriya means one who has done a lot of Shravana. Then the second line, tapasa vindate mahat. Look at his interpretation. Mahat simply means great. In his commentary, he says Mahat Brahma. Brahman. So not just anything that is great, but in particular, Nirguna Brahman. Mahat Brahma. Nirguna because it's in a neuter gender. Mahat Brahma vindate. One gains Nirguna Brahman. How? Tapasa, and he literally says tapasa yuktya. He just interprets. He says tapas means yukti, reasoning. Now reasoning is not a common translation of tapas, but he's free to interpret any way he wants. So yuktya, through yukti, through reasoning, vindate mahat. One gains nirguna Brahman. Yukti means what? Using yukti, reasoning in your spiritual practice, is part of the practice we call manana. So the first line talks about Shravana, hearing the teachings of Vedanta. The second line, yuktya, through reasoning, one practices manana. Now we come to the third line, dhritya, dvatiyavan bhavati. So, dvatiyavan, a second. And his interpretation is very creative. It's like, make any notes here? No. So you gain a second. And his interpretation is, you gain like a second self. You already have yourself as a jiva, but you can gain a second self, which is Satchirananda Atma. That is a second. That's a reach. In other words, it's a very novel, creative, and not very literal kind of interpretation at all. So you gain a second, meaning you discover Satchidananda Atma, a second self, as it were. How? Dhritya. Dhriti, patience. The word dhriti does have many meanings. One meaning is fortitude and courage, and another meaning, it kind of hints at meditation. So he takes dhriti as nididhyasana. So he turns these three lines into Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. So through Nididhyasana, through Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, you gain enlightenment. Through Nididhyasana, you gain Satchidananda Atma. And finally, Buddhiman Vriddha Sevaya. Vriddha for him, of course, will be Guru. Through sitting at the feet of your Guru, and practicing Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, what is the outcome? Buddhiman bhavati, you become enlightened. So this is an example of Nilakanta's commentary, and I'm bringing this to your attention because something you should know about scriptural interpretation. The interpretation of any scripture is always through the eyes of the interpreter, and according to their inclination, according to their orientation, they're going to interpret. There are a great number of commentaries, for example, on the Bhagavad Gita. And these commentaries interpret the Bhagavad Gita in radically different ways, not slightly different ways, completely different ways. They'll take the same verse and come to opposite conclusions. In fact, the famous example, Sarva Dharman Paratyajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, at the end of the 18th chapter, if you look at how that verse has been interpreted by different commentators, you'll wonder if they were reading the same verse. It's so different. We need to know this. This is true of ancient interpreters, the ones who wrote the commentaries. This is equally true of modern interpreters. Everyone is going to interpret according to their own perspective. Now I'll come to that final point. I just want to share with you, this is a hilarious anecdote, a real story about how we all interpret things according to our own orientation. When I was younger and living in the Salisbury, Pennsylvania ashram, I had a problem with chronic headaches. One of my students was a neurologist. So he says, come into my office, we'll do a workup, neurological workup. So I went there, he does all of his neurological stuff and sends me for the CT scan, etc., etc. And anyway, a week later, he says, yes, you have migraine headaches, please take this. He gave me this beta blocker. So I started taking the beta blocker, and anyway, it went on. I took the beta blocker, the headaches came back. He says, take more, doubles the dose. And then the headaches come back again. He says, double the dose again. I think, this can't be right. So I talked to another student who was an internist, and he says, it's definitely not migraines. And how did she diagnose? I said, when I press on my temples, the headache goes away. And she said, how can it be a migraine? Migraine is in the brain, inside your skull. If you're pressing on your temples, you're not pressing on your brain. And a migraine is a headache in the brain. So she said, it's a what they call tension band headache. And she said, there's something wrong in your lifestyle. And she hit it on the head. I was not getting regular exercise. And I simply made a point of getting regular exercise. The chronic headaches went away. Now, the point of this story is I went to see a neurologist, and what was his diagnosis? According to his perspective, suppose I went to see a podiatrist. Suppose I went to see a urologist. I mean, this is just an anecdote just to illustrate how we are all stuck in our own heads, seeing the world from our own individual perspectives. So, the word of warning is whenever you read a spirit, and we'll keep it confined to spiritual books, whenever you read a translation, a commentary, or an individual work, remember what you are reading is the author's perspective. It's something unique to that author. Now, please, the last point needs to be made very clearly now. When you have I think this is a limitation of my medical story, set that aside. And now we come to the field of scriptural interpretation. When you have all these different commentaries and all these different interpretations, naturally we will ask, which one is right? And that's highly problematic because it presumes there is one and only one right way of interpreting a scripture. Notice how vague some of the Yaksha's questions were. Intentionally vague. And there are many scriptural passages that are, seriously, deliberately and intentionally vague, leading to multiple correct interpretations. Why correct? If an interpretation is correct if it is consistent with the whole scripture. That's our definition of correct. If it is consistent with the whole scripture, it is correct. It is indeed possible for there to be multiple different correct interpretations of a scripture. So then how to know what to read, what to study? I'll say there's a second parameter. One is the interpretation must be consistent, and you'll be surprised how inconsistent many translations and commentaries are. Second thing, and I think the best guiding principle is whatever you're reading, whether it's a commentary or if it's a translation, it should be helpful to you. That's bottom line, right? What is the purpose of our whole spiritual inquiry? What is the purpose of sadhana, spiritual life? It's to lift us up in terms of freeing us from suffering and leading us to truth, to discovery of our true nature. Whatever is helpful can be embraced. Whatever is not helpful, we simply set aside. So with this very pragmatic perspective, we can look at interpretations. So just to finish our comment here, look at Nilakanta's commentary, which if you look at it through the eyes of a scholar, you would say it is highly biased. He's looking at this through the lens of Advaita Vedanta. From a scholarly standpoint, you would say that Nilakanta is superimposing the teachings of Advaita Vedanta on these verses, which are really not teaching Advaita Vedanta. The Yaksha and Yudhishthira in this dialogue, it's not about Advaita Vedanta. We're going to see, we'll see more of the questions in our next class. You'll see they're more about Dharma. We'll see that when we see more questions. So the topic is really Dharma, but notice Nilakanta interprets it as though it was a discussion about Advaita Vedanta. A scholar would say Nilakanta is superimposing the teachings of Advaita Vedanta on it. Now here's a final question. Does that mean Nilakanta is wrong? A little more complicated than that, right? First of all, it's not wrong because he's very consistent with the entire teachings of the Mahabharata, which does teach Advaita Vedanta. So his interpretation is indeed consistent with the entire scripture. And then what was the second? I gave two criteria. One is it should be consistent with the scripture, and the second was it should be helpful. Is Advaita Vedanta helpful? Sure is. So look at this. Even though it's a highly biased interpretation, I agree, it's highly biased. It is absolutely superimposing the teachings of Advaita on verses which are not about Advaita, but still it is consistent with the Mahabharata, and more importantly, it is helpful. So this is really the criteria we use in evaluating any kind of commentary, whether it's in Sanskrit, whether it's in English, whatever language it's in, we evaluate it. Is it consistent and is it helpful? Okay, next time we meet, we'll see more of these questions. Very, very interesting questions of the Yaksha. And then finally, we have to find out the true identity of our Yaksha. We'll see that in the coming classes. Okay, some closing announcements here. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our program for children at 11 o'clock. At 5 p.m., mindful movement and meditation session at 5 p.m. At 6:15 p.m., I'll teach an advanced meditation session. First Sunday of each month, we teach advanced meditation. So please join us. Remember that daylight savings time ends tomorrow, so check your clock, come at the right time. Second thing is, there's something that I've been meaning to share with you. Some people listen to my lectures, which are on our website, but some people have difficulty downloading them or having access if they don't have internet access, like offline access. One of my students has taken on a big project. He's created an app. You know what an app is, right? It runs on your phone and iPad. So he created an app which allows you very convenient access to most of the materials on our website, which means it's all tailored for our website. So you can download things. By the way, he actually had a crew in India do a transcript of my lectures on the entire Bhagavad Gita, and that transcript is also available through this app. So if it's something that would be useful to you, the app is available. You know this technical stuff better than I. It's available both for iOS, Apple, and for Android. That's what he says. So he says his app is available both for iOS and Android, and it's free. It's a free app, and the way you get it is you go to your favorite iOS Apple store or Android store, whatever they are, and the simple way is just search Arshabodha. If you search on Arshabodha, then you can get the app, you can download it freely, and it'll give you very easy access to everything that's on our website. Not everything, most of what's on our website. Okay, library will be open after class, and we'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.